The night Karen learned the true price of stealing from the wrong neighbor began with a scream that cut through our quiet mountain community like a chainsaw ripping metal. And if I had known how far things would spiral after that, I would have locked up my tools, warned the HOA board, and maybe even prayed a little. Because as much as everyone loves to call her HOA Karen, nobody ever expects petty theft to explode literally into a war that turns a whole neighborhood upside down. For weeks, I'd been noticing my carefully chopped firewood pile shrinking despite the fact that I hadn't used a single log since the cold season ended, and at first, I blamed raccoons or neighborhood kids, until one morning at 5 a.m., while drinking coffee on the porch, I saw her, Karen Thompson, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, walking into my yard like she owned the soil under her feet, snatching 2 logs, glancing around, and carting them home like a victorious thief. She didn't even hide it. No shame, no hesitation, just walked off with my hard work, as casually as picking berries. That was the moment I knew she thought I was too quiet, too soft, too harmless to stand up to her, and that assumption would soon become her biggest mistake. I confronted her that afternoon, calmly asking if she'd taken my firewood, and she stared me dead in the eyes and said, "Half this neighborhood's resources belong to the HOA, and as HOA president, I decide who needs what." I almost laughed. HOA president? She got the position because nobody else attended the meeting. Now she strutted around like she was running a dictatorship. When I pushed back, she slapped me with an HOA violation for aggressive tone, yard disorder, and uncooperative neighbor behavior. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just stealing firewood. She was trying to establish dominance. And that's when a much darker idea entered my mind. I had been working on hollowwood logs for a special effects project for a local studio, and I still had the molds, the tools, and even leftover small charges used for controlled smokes. Nothing deadly, nothing meant to hurt anyone, just enough to create a dramatic, explosive puff. If Karen wanted to steal something so badly, I decided to give her something worth stealing. That evening, under the dim porch light, I carved out the centers of several logs, filled them with harmless, but extremely loud, flash charges, sealed them with pine resin, and stacked them neatly on the side of the pile I knew she always hit first. Then I waited. For the next 2 nights, nothing, not a sound, not a shadow moving across my yard. But on the 3rd night, just past midnight, I heard footsteps, slow and sneaky, followed by the quiet scraping of wood being lifted. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and satisfaction. Then, boom! Not fireball, not real fire, but a sharp, echoing blast that sent birds into the sky and lights flicking on across the street. I ran outside to find Karen on the ground, her hair filled with wood dust, her voice cracking as she screamed. He tried to blow me up, sirens already echoing in the distance, because of course she called 911 before even standing up, and as the red and blue lights flashed across my yard, the officer stepped out, looking at the destroyed log pieces, my shocked neighbors, and Karen pointing at me with shaking hands. And one officer asked the words that drained the blood from my face. "Sir, we need to know exactly what you filled those logs with, because this doesn't look like a harmless prank anymore." The moment the officer repeated his question, "What exactly did you put inside those logs?" My stomach dropped because even though I knew the charges were harmless, the look on Karen's face and the chaos around us made it clear she had already spun the story into something monstrous that would bury me alive if I didn't take control fast. I explained everything, how the charges were the exact same type used by movie prop teams, regulated, low yield, incapable of causing real harm. Yet as I spoke, Karen clutched her neck dramatically and moaned like she'd barely survived a battlefield explosion, telling officers that she'd seen her life flash before her eyes, and that I had premeditated a lethal attack over lawn decor disputes. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering, some siding with me because they'd been victims of her petty tyranny too, others afraid that siding with me meant inviting HOA retaliation. Officer Ramirez, the only one in the group who knew about special effects materials, examined fragments of the hollow logs and gave a slow nod. "This isn't deadly," he said, "but it's loud, and enough to scare someone badly." Before I could breathe out a sigh of relief, Karen shot back. "Scare? Scar?" He tried to murder me with booby-trapped firewood. Then, classic Karen, she launched into a full meltdown. clutching her heart and collapsing to her knees, as though she'd been gravely injured by nothing more than with dust. Paramedics arrived, checking her over, finding absolutely nothing wrong except elevated trauma levels. But that didn't stop her from demanding that I be arrested for domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism over Firewood. The officers refused to arrest me. Instead, they said this looked more like a neighbor dispute gone wrong and told us to cool off and settle it civilly. Karen stormed home, screaming into her phone, probably calling every HOA board member she manipulated over the years. I knew what was coming next, a full-blown HOA attack. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find 6 violation notices taped to my door. Improper with storage, unauthorized construction of modified materials, threatening behavior, non-compliant yard boundaries. She even cited me for a hostile aura. A hostile aura. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't read it myself. That same evening, I caught her sneaking onto my property again. Not to steal, but take pictures, videos, measurements, collecting evidence for some twisted case she was building. That's when I realized she wasn't trying to punish me. She was trying to remove me from the neighborhood entirely. And then I made the discovery that changed everything. While checking my security cameras for footage of her trespassing, I noticed something odd. She had entered my yard 3 hours earlier than the time she claimed she was attacked, meaning the log that exploded wasn't the first one she touched that night. Curious, I rewound the footage further, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Karen had taken 4 logs earlier, carried them home, and stacked them beside her fireplace. If any of those contained charges, and she lit one, she would blow apart her whole living room. I raced toward her house, sprinting across the cul-de-sac, heart hammering, not to help her but to prevent the explosion that would frame me for something far bigger than a prank. But just as I reached her driveway, I heard a sound that chilled me to the core. The metallic clink of her fireplace grate opening, followed by the scratch of a match being struck. I didn't knock. I kicked Karen's door open so hard it slammed against the wall, because if I was even 3 seconds late, the entire living room would have erupted in a blast loud enough to bring every police car in the county, and the terrifying part was Karen wasn't even startled. She just glared at me like I'd interrupted a spa day, gripping a lit match above the hollow firewood log as if daring me to stop her. "What do you think you're doing in my house?" she hissed, her voice steady but her eyes wild. And for a moment I wondered if she had completely lost her grip on reality. "Put the match down," I warned, stepping slowly toward her, but she smirked and said, "You want your precious firewood? Here, let's use it the way it's meant to be used." She moved the flame closer. I lunged forward. The match fell. It hit the hearth, right beside the hollow log, but instead of exploding, nothing happened. Silence. Confusion. Then I saw the tiny hole on the log's underside. The charge had already been triggered earlier from pressure when she carried it home. That meant the danger wasn't in this log. It meant the other logs she had taken earlier were the real threat. Before I could explain, a faint muffled pop came from the other room, followed by Karen's cat bolting out from the hallway with fur puffed like a balloon. Karen shrieked, dropping the second match as she sprinted after it, yelling something about my curtains and my HOA report papers. I ran behind her, expecting flames or smoke. But what I found was worse. The blast had blown open a locked storage cabinet in her study, spilling out folders, photos, and documents that revealed far more than petty HOA agendas. There were property maps with boundary lines altered in red marker, forged letters with fake county seals, lists of targeted homeowners she planned to find, and even photographs of neighbors with notes like "easy to intimidate," "financially weak," "push harder," and "remove by year end." She wasn't just abusing the HOA system. She was orchestrating a takeover of the entire neighborhood. Karen burst in behind me and saw the paper scattered on the floor, her face draining of color. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered, not with fear, but with cold fury, as she crouched and started grabbing papers off the carpet like a frantic raccoon hoarding scraps. I held up a file labeled Emergency Removal Protocol, Phase 1, and her expression twisted into something almost feral. "Give that back," she snarled. Then she lunged at me, nails out, grabbing for the folder. We struggled, bumping into furniture, knocking over lamps, until she suddenly froze, her eyes widening. Not because of me, but because of the sound echoing from outside, the low rumble of multiple car engines pulling into the cul-de-sac at once. Karen's breathing stopped. She looked toward the window with terror, not anger. "No, not them, not now," she whispered, crawling back where his headlights swept across her front porch. I peered through the blinds to see 3 black SUVs pulling up, heavy, official-looking, not police, not county vehicles. The doors opened slowly. Men stepped out. They weren't in uniforms. They weren't neighbors. They weren't law enforcement. And judging by the way Karen suddenly hid behind her overturned coffee table, shaking, they weren't there for me. They were there for her. And as one of the men lifted a folder, the same type of file I had found labeled Phase 1, and read my name out loud, his voice deep and emotionless, I realized something horrifying. Karen wasn't just abusing the HOA. She had been working with people who expected her to clear out certain residents. And I was next on their list. The second the man in the black coat read my name from the folder, everything inside me froze, as if the entire universe paused to let the weight of that moment sink into my bones, because it meant these people, these silent, hard-faced men emerging from sleek SUVs, had come not because of the Firewood, not because of the HOA dispute, but because Karen had been feeding them information far beyond petty neighborhood politics, and now I was tangled in whatever secret operation she'd been running. Behind everyone's backs, something far darker, far bigger, and far more dangerous than hollow logs and fake violations. I ducked lower beneath the window as Karen crawled beside me. Her earlier fury evaporated, replaced with trembling fear I had never seen in her eyes. Not even when a log exploded in her face. Not even when she thought I'd trapped her. But now, confronted with these men, she looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. "You have to leave," she whispered, voice cracking. "You don't understand who they are." I grabbed her arm, yanking her closer, then explained. "Now." Her breath came in rapid gasps. "They're not part of the HOA. The HOA is just a cover. The shield. They bought me off 2 years ago to help them push out certain residents. People who owned land they wanted. People like you." My blood went cold. "And what do they want with my land?" She gulped hard, eyes flicking toward the door as footsteps approached the porch. "It's not your land. It's what's under your land." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the doorknob jiggled. She grabbed my wrist. "If they catch you here with me, they'll think you know everything. Run. Now." But before she could shove me toward the back door, the front door lock cracked open. 3 men stepped in with a smooth, practiced confidence that said they had done this 1,000 times and never failed. They swept the room with calm, predatory eyes. I ducked behind her overturned couch, pulling Karen with me. One of the men spoke into an earpiece. Interior clear. No signs of forced entry. Another man lifted the broken hollow log on the floor. "This the guy's work," he muttered. "The leader, the one with the folder," flipped the papers and said, "He's been marked as non-compliant for 6 months. He glanced at Karen's name in another file, was supposed to phase him out quietly. She failed. Karen's hand gripped mine so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "They think I failed because of you," she hissed under her breath. "But if they find you here, they'll assume I told you everything." The men moved deeper into the house, searching, opening cabinets, inspecting the blown-open study. One of them picked up the forged documents scattered on the floor. "She kept evidence," he said coldly. "She's a liability." Karen's breath hitched so loudly I feared they heard it. The leader stepped back into the living room and said, "Locate her. We'll handle the removal tonight." Was over. For her. And if they found me, over for me too. Karen mouthed silently. Back door. We crawled as quietly as possible, every floorboard threatening to betray us. Every shadow now feeling alive and dangerous. We reached the kitchen, inches from freedom, when a heavy boot step thudded right behind us. "Going somewhere?" the leader's voice said. Karen screamed. I grabbed the nearest object, a cast-iron skillet, and swung blindly behind me. Metal met bone with a sickening crack. The leader staggered, and for a heartbeat the other men froze. That single heartbeat was all we needed. I shoved Karen out the back door as the men shouted, pulling out weapons, not guns, but long metal taser rods glowing with deadly voltage. We sprinted into the night, the cold air hitting us like a slap, our feet pounding across the dewy grass as beams of flashlights cut through the darkness behind us. Head to your property, Karen yelled. They won't follow us there. That made no sense. Why wouldn't they chase me to the one place they want control over? But I didn't have time to question her. We ran, dodging hedges and fences, leaping over garden stones, until we reached the edge of my land, my silent, lonely stretch of pine trees and brush. The men stopped at the property line, all of them, standing perfectly still in a chilling formation, as if an invisible barrier kept them from stepping farther. The leader wiped the blood from his forehead and pointed at me with the taser rod. "We will return for what belongs to us," he said, voice low and steady. "And when we do, there won't be any warnings left." Then they turned back, walked to their SUVs, and drove away without a single look back, leaving Karen and me standing in the darkness, panting, confused, terrified. I rounded on her. "Tell me what they want under my land." She looked at me with hollow, defeated eyes. "I didn't believe it at first," she whispered, "but they showed me proof. Something ancient is buried beneath your property. A structure. A vault. She stopped. Her face went pale. I turned slowly. A deep, rumbling vibration trembled through the earth beneath our feet, like something massive shifting underground. The trees around us shivered. The soil cracked slightly. And then, from the depths beneath my property, something knocked. 3 slow, heavy booms that echoed through the ground like a heartbeat awakening after centuries of sleep. Karen backed away, eyes wide with horror. "Oh, God," she whispered, voice barely audible. "They weren't supposed to wake it up." The ground didn't just shake this time. It roared, a deep, ancient, bone-vibrating growl that rose from the soil beneath my land like something old in the town, old in the state, older than anything that should ever be disturbed by human hands. And as the vibration pulsed up through my boots, through my spine, through my skull, I realized Section 4 wasn't the climax of this nightmare at all. It was only the door creaking open to something far worse. The trees surrounding my property bent inward as if bowing to whatever was beneath us, the air crackling with static so strong that my hair stood on end and Karen's breath came out in quick, panicked gasps, her eyes locked on the cracked soil as if she expected a hand, no, a claw, to burst through at any moment. "We woke it," she whispered again, trembling so violently her teeth clacked. I told them we weren't ready." I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "What is under my land? Tell me now." She looked up at me, tears streaking through the dust on her face. "A vault built before the county existed, before the first settlers. The HOA wasn't just an HOA. They were a front for the group studying what was buried. Those men, they're not government. They're not private security. They're something in between. They've been trying to map the vault for years, but the entrance was never confirmed until," she swallowed hard, "until the ground disturbances started. They thought it was unstable land. But it wasn't. It was waking up." Another knock boomed beneath us, this time harder, so powerful it sent flocks of birds screaming into the night sky. I stumbled back, gripping a tree trunk as the soil split open another inch. Faint blue light leaked through the crack, blue, like something glowing far below the ground. Karen stepped back, shaking her head. "It's reacting to you," she whispered. "You stepped on it. You triggered it. That's why they want your land. They think you're connected to it somehow." "Connected? To what?" "The neighborhood was founded only 40 years ago. My land had been in my family for 100. No record of anything unusual. No old legends. No warnings. Nothing. And yet the pulsing glow grew brighter, throbbing in a rhythm, boom, 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 as if synced to my heartbeat. Then the earth split again, a jagged crack racing toward us like lightning across the ground. Karen screamed, jumping aside. I fell backward, my palm scraping against gravel as the crack stopped just a foot short of my leg, blue light pouring out like a glowing wound in the earth. And then, I swear on everything I have ever loved, I heard a voice, not spoken, not heard through ears. It vibrated through my bones, a low, ancient whisper curling through my mind like cold smoke. You finally returned. I froze. My breath vanished. My heart slammed against my ribs. Returned? I had never been here before. I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. Did you hear that? I croaked. Karen's face went blank with confusion. Hear what? She asked, voice shaking. The voice, I said. It spoke. It knew me. Karen backed away slowly. I didn't hear anything. The blue light surged again, this time rising like a beam shooting upward. The trees whipped violently as wind spun in a tight spiral around us, forming a vortex. The soil lifted in chunks as gravity warped, small stones floating upward like weightless satellites. Karen was screaming something, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind. The blue beam concentrated into a point, right beneath my feet. I tried to run, but something held my ankles, like invisible hands gripping me from below. I clawed at the dirt, pulling myself forward inch by inch. Karen reached out, grabbing my arm. Move, she cried. You have TO. But before she could finish, the blue light flared with a blinding flash, and the world snapped to white. Silence. Then darkness. When I opened my eyes, everything was wrong. I wasn't on my property anymore. I wasn't even outside. I was lying on a floor, cold metallic, with faint patterns carved into it like ancient runes. The blue light pulsed around the circular chamber, shadows twisting along the curved walls. I staggered to my feet, heart pounding so violently I thought it would burst. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in a space that felt impossibly large, impossibly old. And then I saw it, a tall, stone-like figure standing at the center of the chamber, carved with symbols that matched the glowing patterns on the floor. Its head slowly turned toward me, stone grinding against stone, and the same voice from the ground whispered once more, this time unmistakable and clear, Welcome home. The stone figure didn't move toward me. It didn't have to, because the moment its head turned fully in my direction, every instinct I had screamed that I wasn't looking at a statue at all, but at something alive, something ancient, something that had been waiting in that chamber long before my neighborhood existed, long before my family owned the property, long before the first maps of this region were even drawn, and the worst part was that it didn't feel surprised to see me. It felt expectant. My pulse hammered as I stumbled backward, trying to understand where I was, what this chamber was, how I had been pulled underground, but the air itself vibrated with a low, resonant hum that seemed to sync with my heartbeat, almost guiding it, controlling it. And as I pressed my palm against a glowing wall, the carvings shifted beneath my touch as if the entire structure were alive, responding to me like a long-lost companion. Why are you calling me home? I demanded, forcing the words out even though every cell in my body urged me to run. Not that there was anywhere to run in this sealed chamber. The stone figure's eyes, two deep-set pits glowing faintly blue, blinked for the first time, and the grinding of ancient mechanisms echoed around the chamber. Your blood carries the imprint, it rumbled, each word vibrating to the metallic floor like a seismic tremor. The key bearer returns when the surface threatens a vault. My breath hitched. Key bearer? Blood imprint? None of this made sense. My family had never mentioned anything unusual about this land, no legends, no warnings. But then I remember my grandfather's strange stories, the ones he would tell late at night when the generator lights flickered, about the sleeping giant under the pines, and the watchers waiting for the heir. Stories we all laughed at. Stories we thought were just the ramblings of an old mind losing its grip. This is insane, I muttered. But the chamber reacted violently to my doubt. Blue pulses rippled up the walls, the floor shifted, and the air thickened like the room was breathing. The figure stepped forward, each movement shaking dust from the ancient ceiling. You were not meant to awaken us yet, it said. The intruders forced the vault's call to reach you early. Intruders, the men in the SUVs, the forged HOA documents, Karen's terror. Everything connected in a way I didn't understand yet. But one thing was clear. They had known about this vault long before I did, and they were trying to access it. What do they want? I asked, bracing myself. The figure lifted an arm, pointing toward the high dome ceiling, as if gesturing to the world above. Power. Knowledge. the weapon buried at the heart of this vault. A weapon that can only be activated by the bloodline meant to guard it. My mouth went dry. And that's me? Yes. The figure said simply, and its tone shifted, now lower, heavier, almost mournful. But you are untrained, unprepared. You are supposed to learn, to be guided, to awaken by choice, not be dragged by force. Before I could respond, a deafening crack thundered overhead. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The chamber trembled. The figure's head snapped upward. They had begun drilling, it growled. They breached the vault. My chest tightened. The men, the ones who stopped at the property line, they must have returned with equipment, determined to access the underground chamber from above. What happens if they reach us? I asked. The figure didn't answer with words. Instead, the entire floor lit up in a circular pattern, and suddenly I saw them, visions, projected in blue flame like holograms. Men in black coats lowering massive machinery, explosives, cutting tools, all directed toward a central point, directly above where I stood. No! I shouted, but the vision flickered out. If they reached the vault without the keybearer's permission, the figure said, the vault will defend itself. Defend itself how? I asked, already fearing the answer. This time, the figure turned its glowing eyes directly into mine. By releasing everything it has contained for thousands of years. The chamber shuddered again, this time so violently that I fell to my knees. A deep rumble vibrated through the floor. The walls changed color from blue to a warning red. The surface breach begins, the figure warned. You must choose, open the vault willingly or let it tear open violently. My heartbeat went wild. I don't know how to open anything. I don't even know why I'm connected to this place. The figure stepped closer, its shadow engulfing me. The vault knew you would say that. That is why it prepared your guide. My what? I whispered, but before the figure could answer, a new voice echoed to the chamber. Familiar, terrified, and impossibly close. Hey! Hey! Can you hear me? Are you down there? My breath caught in my throat. That was Karen's voice, echoing from above, distorted by depth and panic. She had found the crack. She had followed me. She was calling down into the vault. Into a place she was never supposed to enter. The stone figure turned sharply, its entire body stiffening as the walls flashed red in violent pulses. She must not enter, it thundered. She is not of the bloodline. If she steps into the chamber, a massive explosion shook the entire vault, cutting the figure off. Debris rained from the ceiling. A blinding shaft of white light burst down from above as the vault roof began to crack open, and through the widening hole I saw silhouettes, multiple, descending rapidly with ropes and harnesses. Not just Karen. The men in black were coming straight into the vault, and the figure whispered one final warning as the ceiling split apart. If they reach you first, the world above will burn. The next morning began with a silence so unnatural that it felt staged, a stillness that clung to the air like the world was holding its breath for whatever was about to happen. And as I stepped out onto my porch with a cup of coffee and eyes still heavy from a night of barely sleeping, I instantly knew Section 7 of this nightmare was going to be the worst, because Karen was never the type to accept defeat, not even when defeat was right there, legally stamped, notarized, and delivered to her, doorstep by the survey team, county department, and even her own embarrassed attorney. She had caused chaos for nearly a month, but the look she gave me yesterday, tight smile, shaking hands, pupils darting like she was mapping out her next attack, told me she was preparing a comeback. Something so delusional and dramatic, it would make everything before look like a warm-up act, and sure enough, before I even took the second sip of coffee, 3 unfamiliar SUVs rolled down my dirt road in a perfectly synchronized formation, stopping right outside my gate as if they had rehearsed their entrance. Out stepped Karen wearing oversized sunglasses, a bright red blazer, a clipboard clutched under her arm, and behind her marched a group of residents from her HOA, people I had never met but had certainly heard yelling during her previous meltdowns. Except this time, they weren't yelling. They were standing in a line like soldiers forced into battle, all holding the same printed papers. And Karen strutted forward with the confidence of a dictator who believed she was about to reclaim lost territory, announcing in a voice that cracked but still pushed out arrogance. We hereby inform you that this land, according to the Declaration of Community Expansion Guidelines, is within the jurisdiction of Pine Heights HOA Phase 2, which made me laugh so loudly I actually startled a crow off my fence because Pine Heights HOA was 2 miles away, behind a creek, and her Phase 2 expansion existed only in the mind of a woman who refused to accept reality. But instead of arguing, I simply leaned against a post and calmly responded, "Karen, you already lost legally. You lost a survey dispute. The county confirmed the boundary is fully mine, and even your lawyer walked out on you. What are you still trying to win here?" That question cracked her mask for a moment. Her jaw tensed, her face twitched, but she quickly recovered and snapped her fingers at the group behind her, ordering them to hand me their papers. And when I looked over the stack, it was a collection of bogus signatures from HOA members claiming they were voting to annex my land into their community. Except the signatures were so obviously fake that even a child could spot the repeated handwriting, same loops, same pressure, same awkward attempt at cursive. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't just delusional anymore. She was desperate, and desperate people do stupid things, dangerous things. Things they later pretend they were forced into because reality didn't match the fantasy they built in their heads. I told her the documents were invalid and that she needed to leave, or I would call the sheriff. But instead of backing down, she stepped closer to me, too close, and hissed, "You think this ends because some county official stamped a page? You think you've won? Oh no, this is far from over. By the end of the day, you'll be begging to negotiate." And with that ominous threat, she spun around dramatically, signaled her little entourage, and marched back to the SUVs, leaving dust clouds swirling behind them as they drove off. I knew she was planning something reckless, but I didn't expect how quickly she would escalate, because not even 30 minutes passed before I heard machinery, heavy machinery, approaching from the old service road behind my property. And my stomach dropped when I spotted 2 rented bulldozers and a flatbed truck carrying metal fencing, concrete posts, and signs labeled HOA property, and trespassing, and marching in front of all it was Karen, waving her arms like she was conducting an orchestra, shouting for the workers, who clearly had no idea what madness they had signed up for, to begin marking the ground for excavation. That was it. I dialed the sheriff immediately, and while waiting for deputies to arrive, I ran over and confronted her, yelling over the rumbling engines, "You do not have permission to touch my land." But she yelled back even louder, "This is community development, and you're the one trespassing on future HOA land," which nearly made one of the workers choke on his water, because even they knew how ridiculous she sounded. And before she could get the order to start digging, 3 sheriff cruisers flew down the dirt road, lights flashing, dust swirling in spirals behind them. And when the deputies stepped out, the lead officer, Deputy Harris, who already knew all about Karen from previous complaints, looked exhausted before the conversation even started. He asked Karen for permits, authorization paperwork, boundary approvals, anything that would legally justify the equipment she brought. And when she fumbled, waved her hands, and eventually pointed at her fake signatures like they meant something, Harris didn't hold back, telling her, "Ma'am, I warned you last time. Touching his property again will lead to charges." But Karen exploded, screaming about conspiracies, bribed officials, corrupt surveyors, and unfair treatment, pacing in circles like a malfunctioning robot until one of her own HOA followers whispered, "Karen, maybe we should just go," which set her off even more as she spun on him and shrieked, "And one leaves. This is my land, too." By then, neighbors from miles around were gathering near the fence line, recording everything on their phones, whispering, laughing, gasping at how unhinged she had become. And to make it worse, her husband, who had avoided this drama entirely until now, finally arrived and begged her to stop, pulling her aside and trying to calm her down. But she shoved him, pointed at me, and screamed, "He stole half of what's mine," causing everyone, including the deputies, to go silent because that wasn't just a lie, it was a dangerous delusion. Harris finally declared that Karen was trespassing, obstructing an investigation, and illegally attempting to break ground on private property. And when he instructed her to step aside to be detained, she snapped, full meltdown mode, sprinting toward one of the bulldozers as if she planned to start herself, climbing onto the steps while yelling, "If the law won't enforce what's right, then I will." But the deputies quickly pulled her down, handcuffed her, and escorted her to the cruiser as she continued screaming nonsense that echoed across the land like a chaotic anthem of defeat. Once she was gone, her embarrassed followers dispersed quietly. The machinery company apologized profusely, promising they had no idea she lacked permission, and her husband stood near my gate looking like a man whose entire life had collapsed in one afternoon, telling me in a tired, broken voice, "I'm sorry, she hasn't been sleeping, she's been obsessed with this property." I tried to stop her, and I simply replied, gently but honestly, "She almost ruined her life over land that never belonged to her." And he nodded, tears in his eyes, whispering, "I know," before walking away. As the cruisers drove off with Karen screaming in the backseat about unfinished business, I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering dread, because people like her never truly accept defeat. And as I stood in the golden glow of the late afternoon sun, watching dust settle on the now quiet land, I had no idea what the next twist would be, but something told me the storm wasn't over, not yet, not with Karen.